Get out. Get out of my life, because there is no place for bad people in it now. I have let go of all the bad people and lost them. I shouted at him, though my voice was trembling. I could see my father's hand tightening on the doorframe, knuckles pale, but he didn't say a word. He just stood there, silent, with the envelope of unpaid bills and the mortgage notice sticking out of his worn jacket pocket. When the door finally closed behind him, I covered my face with both hands and cried. I was 54, sitting alone in my big, quiet house, and for a moment, it felt like I was 14 again, a runaway kid hiding under a broken bridge, crying into my knees so nobody could hear me. It's strange how pain has a way of circling back, no matter how far you think you've run from it. In my life, I've cried sincerely only twice before. The first time was when the girl I built my entire world for, the one I worked days and nights for, the one I dreamed would be the mother of my children, left me. I had thought love was unbreakable if you gave it everything. But that day, I learned that giving everything sometimes isn't enough. The second time was the day I found my birth mother. I had imagined that reunion since childhood. I thought she would cry, hold me tight, apologize for all the nights I slept cold and hungry without knowing why she left. Instead, she looked at me without recognition, as if I were a stranger interrupting her peace. And then she said it. I saved and raised the children I needed, and I removed the unnecessary ones from my life. You were a mistake I didn't notice in time. I remember standing there, my hands numb, my throat dry, thinking, so this is it. This is my beginning. And now, years later, my father, the man I searched for all my life, shows up not with love, not with regret, but with a request for $100,000 to save his house. A father who didn't exist when I needed him, who suddenly appeared only when I had something to give. I wanted to forgive him. I really did. But forgiveness is harder than people make it sound. I wasn't born lucky. My childhood was stitched together from abandonment and survival. My birth mother left me. My foster mother adopted me, but not for love. She saw children as numbers on a check. Every week, she'd calculate what the government paid her to take care of me and remind me that I owed her my existence. By 14, I couldn't take it anymore. I ran away. No plan, no suitcase, just my worn sneakers and a determination to never look back. At night, the bridges were my roof. I learned the weight of hunger, the sting of cold concrete against my cheek, the sound of passing footsteps that never stopped to help. But I also learned something else. There are angels disguised as ordinary people. One of them was Mr. Thompson, my high school history teacher. He noticed the bruises under my sleeves, the way I stayed after class pretending to read so I wouldn't have to go home. One day, he placed a book on my desk, Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. You're going to need this more than homework, he said quietly. That book taught me about control, that life doesn't always give you choices, but it always gives you the power to choose who you'll be. The other angel was Ray, a homeless man I met under the Jefferson Bridge. He smelled of old cigarettes and rain, but he had the softest eyes. One night, while we shared a half-eaten sandwich, he told me, "Kid, the streets'll teach you two things. Nobody owes you nothing, and nobody can take away your will to rise." I held on to those words like a lifeline. At 16, I realized if I stayed under bridges, I'd become one of those ghosts people stepped over without seeing. So I enrolled in a community college with a dormitory. It wasn't easy. I had no family, no money, and no idea what future I was building. To afford tuition, I worked at a small pizzeria, scrubbing ovens and making dough until my hands blistered. The owner, Mike, hated me. Not because I was bad at my job, I wasn't. But his girlfriend, Claire, liked to talk to me, and Mike was the kind of man who confused attention with betrayal. Out of jealousy, he moved me from the kitchen to delivery duty, thinking he could humiliate me. But I refused to break. Instead of delivering pizzas, I quit and found work at a competitor's restaurant down the street. 2 years later, I went from an ordinary cook to sous chef, the youngest they'd ever had. Life was finally giving me a little light. And then came Claire. Yes, Mike's Claire. She found me one evening after her shift, standing outside the restaurant. She said she left him. She said she admired my strength, my stubbornness, my refusal to bow to anyone. And when someone tells you you're strong, after years of feeling unwanted, you believe them. I fell in love. Or at least I thought I did. I worked double shifts to give her a life I thought she deserved, dinners, dresses, vacations we couldn't afford but took anyway. And while I was fighting to build her a castle, she was visiting someone else's kingdom, a wealthy fitness club owner who promised her fame. The first time I caught her, I forgave her. I told myself love was about second chances. The second time, I found her in our own house, the one we'd mortgaged together, where we dreamed of raising our children someday. I threw her out that night. And with her went the last naive pieces of me. That was when I built my new philosophy. Don't be sweet, or they'll lick you up. Don't be bitter, or they'll spit you out. It's not a disaster when someone doesn't love you. The disaster is losing yourself trying to earn a love that isn't there. I stopped giving. I stopped believing. But karma doesn't care about your walls. Because one night, walking home from work, I heard music, soft, fragile, like hope trying to survive the noise of the city. An 18-year-old girl sat on the sidewalk, guitar in hand, her voice trembling but beautiful. I never gave money to street performers. I had promised myself I wouldn't. But that night, I broke my promise. I gave her $20. I didn't know then that it would change everything. I didn't plan to stop. I didn't plan to notice her. But that night, something about her voice pulled me in. It wasn't polished or confident. It cracked on high notes and hesitated on low ones, but there was pain in it, honest, raw pain, and I recognized it like you recognize an old scar on your own skin. When I handed her the $20 bill, she stopped playing and looked up at me. Her eyes were green, restless, and tired in a way 18-year-old eyes shouldn't be. "Thank you," she whispered, but then lowered her gaze, as if afraid to meet mine for too long. I walked away. Yet 10 minutes later, I heard shouting. I turned and saw 3 guys, other street musicians, pushing her around, arguing over the spot she'd taken. I don't know why I went back. I trained myself to stay out of other people's messes. But there I was, standing between her and them, telling them to leave. Maybe they saw something in my face, maybe they just weren't up for a fight, but they backed off. "You shouldn't be out here alone," I said. She smiled faintly. "It's not like I have a choice." I hesitated, then offered her coffee at the pizzeria where I worked. She followed me without a word. Her name was Lily. Over coffee, she told me pieces of her story, a small town she'd left behind, parents who didn't understand her, a dream of singing on real stages instead of street corners. She spoke softly, but when she talked about music, her whole face lit up. I offered her a part-time job washing dishes in the pizzeria. At first, she refused, saying she didn't want charity. But I convinced her it wasn't charity. I needed help, and she needed a stable place to land. She started coming in every evening after her street sets, tying her hair back and scrubbing pans while humming melodies under her breath. I'd find myself pausing at the counter just to listen. She was 18. I was 28. I told myself I was just helping her. That was all. But life has a way of dissolving the boundaries we draw. One night, as I was locking up, she stopped me at the door. "I wrote something," she said nervously. "I want you to hear it." She handed me a small recorder. I pressed play, and her voice filled the quiet hallway, trembling but strong, aching but full of hope. And then I heard my own name woven into the lyrics. It was a song about walls, about locked hearts, about someone teaching her to believe she was worth more than survival. She'd written it for me. I stood there, frozen, staring at her. "Lily," I began, but she cut me off. "I know you're afraid," she whispered. "I can feel it every time you look away. But I'm not asking you for forever. I'm just asking you to feel something again." I tried to speak, but all my practiced detachment, the armor I'd built over years of betrayal, cracked under the weight of her sincerity. For the first time in years, I let someone in. We fell in love the way rain turns into a storm, slowly at first, then all at once. I remember the first time I kissed her. It was raining, and we were standing under the flickering streetlight outside the pizzeria. She was shivering, her guitar case slung over one shoulder, and I just couldn't stop myself. She laughed against my lips, soft and surprised. "About time," she whispered. I remember how alive I felt, how light. I was 28, but with her, I felt 18 again, reckless, foolish, unbreakable. We moved in together 6 months later. Our apartment was small, our furniture mismatched, but the walls were filled with music and laughter. I proposed to her on her 19th birthday. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet dinner, a candle, a ring I'd saved for. When I asked, she started crying and whispered yes before I could finish the question. For the first time, I thought maybe the universe had finally stopped punishing me. But karma is patient. A year into our marriage, she auditioned for a talent show. I supported her, of course, helped her rehearse, cheered her on, held her when she doubted herself. Then she met him. A music producer. Older. Charismatic. Promised her the world. I found out through a friend who'd seen them together at a hotel. I confronted her, expecting denial, expecting tears, expecting something. Instead, she just stared at me, silent, and finally whispered, "I didn't mean to, Bill." And that was it. She left 2 weeks later. Took her clothes, her guitar, her dreams, and the part of me I'd just started to rebuild. I didn't date after Lily. Didn't trust. Didn't open doors, didn't open my heart. I worked. I built the pizzeria into something bigger. I bought properties, invested, turned my life into a fortress of success so tall nobody could climb over it. I told myself I was happy. That love was a weakness. That solitude was safer. But at night, when the house was quiet, I'd hear echoes of her song, the one she'd written for me. I'd imagine her on some stage, under bright lights, singing for strangers who didn't know her the way I had. And I'd wonder if she ever thought of me. Years passed. My business grew. My bank account swelled. And yet, the more I gained, the emptier I felt. Then came the diagnosis. Stage 4. The doctors were gentle, but their words were merciless. Palliative care, they said. Focus on quality of life. I thought it was ironic. I'd spent my entire life fighting for a future, only to be told I didn't have one. That's how I ended up here, in the hospice. Where I met her. Where I met Kira. Hospices have a certain silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that hums beneath your skin, reminding you why you're there. The first night I arrived, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the narrow bed, staring at the pale ceiling, listening to the faint ticking of a clock I couldn't see. Down the hall, someone was crying softly. Another room played a lullaby on repeat. Somewhere, a nurse whispered instructions. That's when I saw her for the first time. Kira. She entered my room quietly, carrying a tray. A soft light followed her, though maybe it was just my imagination. She was 35, with dark hair pulled into a loose braid and tired eyes that somehow still held kindness. "I'm your night nurse," she said gently. "Just checking if you need anything." "No," I replied. "I don't need anything." She hesitated for a moment, as if hearing more than I said. Then she nodded and left without another word. I told myself not to notice her. I'd built walls too high to let anyone in, especially now, when the doctors had given me months at best. But I noticed anyway. I noticed how she leaned over patients, brushing damp hair from their foreheads, whispering words she probably repeated dozens of times a day but somehow made sound unique each time. I noticed how she laughed softly with the janitor when he told bad jokes. I noticed how, when she thought nobody was watching, her shoulders sagged under some unseen weight, but the moment someone called her name, she straightened and smiled again. I found myself waiting for her night rounds, pretending to be asleep just to hear her footsteps. One night, I caught her watching me. She thought I was sleeping, but I wasn't. Her fingers brushed my hand, light as breath, almost hesitant. "Don't go yet," she whispered. She didn't know I heard her. Weeks passed. We talked in fragments at first, polite exchanges about the weather, the books I read, the Bible verses she sometimes caught me meditating over. Then, somehow, the fragments grew into conversations. She told me she'd been a nurse for 11 years. That she'd chosen this path after losing someone she loved, a fiancé who died in a car accident 2 months before their wedding. "After that," she said quietly, "I decided to be the person I wished he'd had in his final moments." I didn't know what to say. So I just reached out and touched her hand. She didn't pull away. One evening I asked her, "How do you do it? How do you walk into rooms knowing everyone here has an expiration date?" She looked at me for a long moment and then said, "Because I know that expiration dates don't define what's between now and then." Something about those words stayed with me. And then one night, everything shifted. I woke up to find her sitting by my bed, head resting on folded arms. I thought she was asleep, but when she lifted her face, I saw tears glistening in her eyes. "Kira," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "What's wrong?" She shook her head, wiped her cheeks quickly. "Nothing. Just a bad day. You take care of everyone," I said softly. "Who takes care of you?" Her lips trembled at that, and without meaning to, I reached for her hand. She hesitated, just for a heartbeat, and then let me hold it. From that night on, something unspoken lived between us. I began to change. I started fighting again, against the diagnosis, against the slow surrender my body craved. I asked the doctors about treatments they'd already dismissed, demanded second opinions, third opinions. "You can't reverse this," one of them told me. "Watch me try," I replied. I wanted more time. Not because I feared death, I'd made peace with that long ago. I wanted more time with her. Kira noticed the shift too. "You're different," she said one morning as she checked my vitals. "Stronger somehow." I smiled faintly. Maybe I found something worth fighting for. Her hand stilled. She didn't say anything, but her silence spoke louder than words. We both knew what was happening, but we also knew the rules. Nurses weren't allowed to have relationships with patients. Even the suggestion could cost her everything. So we didn't name it. We lived in stolen moments, the warmth of her hand lingering a little too long when she handed me my medication, the soft laughter we shared over inside jokes, the way our eyes locked across a hallway like we were the only two people left in the world. And then came the day they fired her. The hospice director called it a breach of professionalism. Someone had seen us together on the balcony late at night, sharing coffee, my hand brushing hers. She came to my room, pale and shaking, holding the termination letter. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I sat up, ignoring the ache in my body, and cupped her face in my hands. "Don't be sorry," I said. "Be with me." That was the day we left the hospice together. We went back to my house, the house that had felt like a mausoleum for years. But suddenly, with her in it, the walls seemed warmer, the air lighter. She became my home. At night, we lay side by side, tracing constellations on each other's skin with our fingertips. She laughed more. I breathed easier. For the first time in decades, I wasn't just existing. I was living. And in the quiet hours before dawn, when the pain returned and I thought she was sleeping, I'd whisper a silent thank you to whoever was listening. Because karma, after everything it had taken from me, had finally given me something back. But I also knew, deep down, that this gift came with an unspoken limit. Time. And time, I feared, was running out. There's a strange kind of freedom that comes when you stop pretending you have forever. That's what Kira and I discovered in the weeks after she left the hospice and moved into my house. We didn't talk about my diagnosis anymore. We didn't talk about numbers, months, percentages, or survival rates. We stopped counting how much time was left and started living like time belonged to us. Our mornings began with silence. the kind where words weren't needed because the nearness of another soul said enough. She would sit by the window, tangled in one of my shirts, drinking coffee and humming softly to herself. I would lie in bed, memorizing the curve of her profile, the way sunlight caught in her hair, how her bare feet curled against the chair. I kept thinking, how is it possible that something so simple could feel so infinite? One night, I woke to find her staring at me in the dark. "What?" I whispered, groggy but curious. She smiled faintly. I still can't believe you're real." I reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I was thinking the same thing about you." She kissed my palm, and I swear, for a moment, the pain that gnawed at my ribs daily just vanished. As if her touch rewrote the rules of my body. I taught her the meditations I'd learned years ago from meditations and from a Buddhist monk I once met while traveling. We would sit on the rug in the living room, cross-legged, breathing in sync. "Feel the present," I'd whisper. "It's the only thing we actually own." Sometimes she'd open her eyes mid-practice and look at me like she was memorizing my face, as if she feared she'd wake one day and I'd be gone. And sometimes, in the quiet of those sessions, I felt something strange, like my soul had stopped bracing against life, as if it had finally unclenched its fists. We had rules. Unspoken ones, but we lived by them. No planning too far ahead. We booked no vacations, bought no furniture we didn't need, and didn't talk about someday. Every night mattered. We lit candles at dinner, even if it was just pasta and store-bought wine. Touch was medicine. When she rested her head on my chest, I breathed deeper. When her fingers laced with mine, the tremors in my hands stilled. No regrets allowed. Every moment was lived like it was our first and last. One evening I asked her, "Do you ever regret it? Leaving your job for me, risking everything for someone who—" "Stop." She cut me off gently, touching my lips with her fingers. "Bill, I didn't leave my job. I left a place. You are not a place. You're a person. My person." That broke something inside me. I pulled her into my arms and held her so tightly I felt her heartbeat against mine, two rhythms syncing in defiance of time. We became reckless in the most beautiful ways. We took long drives at midnight, windows down, music blasting through the quiet streets. Sometimes we'd pull over just to lie on the hood of the car, staring at the stars like teenagers making wishes we knew wouldn't come true. We danced in the kitchen to songs from old vinyl records, barefoot on cold tiles, laughing so hard the neighbors banged on the walls. Once, we made a fort of blankets in the living room, drank cheap champagne, and told each other our darkest secrets. She cried when I told her about my birth mother, about the words that had scarred me forever. I cried when she told me about her fiancé, how she'd spent years feeling guilty for surviving him. It was in those moments, fragile, unpolished, heartbreakingly honest, that I understood something I hadn't before. Karma isn't punishment. Karma is balance. Life had taken so much from me, love, family, security. And yet here she was. My balance. My gift. But gifts don't always stay. One morning, Kira came back from a pharmacy run, pale and shaken. She sat at the kitchen table without saying a word, her fingers tight around a small brown envelope. "Kira," I said softly. "What's wrong?" She slid the envelope toward me. Inside was a letter from the Hospice administration. Someone had reported her relationship with me. There was an investigation. If she didn't sign a non-disclosure agreement admitting misconduct, she could lose her nursing license permanently. I expected her to be furious. But she just smiled faintly and said, "They can have the license. They can have you." That night we didn't sleep. We lay side by side, holding each other as though trying to press our souls into one another, to leave marks no one could erase. And when she kissed me, I swear it wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise. That whatever time we had left, we'd live it louder than people who had decades together but never truly loved. The days blurred into each other after that. But not because they were meaningless. Because they were full. So full that sometimes I thought my chest couldn't hold it all. But the body doesn't forgive, no matter how much the heart begs it to. I was getting weaker. Nights became harder. Breathing turned into work. My world shrank to the moments when she held me, when her laughter pulled me back from pain, when her hand on my chest reminded me I was still here. One evening, she knelt by my bed and whispered, "If I could, I'd carry your pain for you." "You already do," I said. "You carry more than you realize." She shook her head fiercely. "No, Bill. You're not a burden. You're the reason I wake up smiling." I closed my eyes and thought, how did I ever live without her? Karma had given me Kira. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't let me keep her forever. I started noticing the little signs first, the shortness of breath that came quicker, the tremor in my hands when I tried to button my shirt, the way my body felt heavier every morning. Kira pretended not to see it. She still laughed the same way, still kissed me like we had a lifetime ahead of us. But I caught the moments when she thought I wasn't looking, the tightness in her jaw, the way her fingers lingered a second longer on my pulse, counting beats she couldn't control. I didn't tell her that I'd stopped believing in miracles. Not because I was bitter, I wasn't, not anymore. But because I finally understood that some gifts come wrapped in an expiration date. One afternoon, while Kira was out getting groceries, I sat in my study, a room I rarely entered before she came into my life. The sunlight spilled through the window, painting the shelves in amber. My old pizzeria documents, real estate contracts, bank statements, they were all spread out on the desk. That's when I started writing my will. I'd built an empire brick by brick, dollar by dollar. Pizzerias turned into chains, chains into investments. I had more money than I could ever spend, but none of it had ever brought me peace. Until her. So, I signed everything over to Kira, the businesses, the properties, the savings. All of it. I imagined her years from now, standing in the pizzeria I once bought with trembling hands, her laughter filling its walls, a child's hand in hers. It comforted me to know that even if I couldn't stay, a part of me would. That night, as we lay on the couch, she rested her head on my chest and whispered, "Bill, promise me you'll fight." I hesitated. "I've been fighting my whole life, Kira. Sometimes I think, maybe this is the one battle I'm supposed to lose." She sat up sharply, tears in her eyes. "Don't you dare say that. You're not leaving me." I cupped her face, wiping away the tears with my thumb. "I'm not leaving you," I whispered. "I'm just walking a little ahead." She broke then, sobbing into my shirt, and I held her, memorizing the sound, the weight, the warmth of her. Days blurred into nights, and nights into something timeless. We stopped following clocks altogether. We'd lie on the balcony, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars until dawn. Sometimes we didn't speak for hours. Sometimes we talked about everything, our regrets, our past, our dreams we knew we wouldn't see together. "Do you think there's something after?" she asked one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "I hope so," I said softly. "Not for me. For you. I hope I get to watch over you somehow." She was quiet for a long time, then whispered, "I don't want the kind of life where I have to look up to find you." Those words cut deeper than the illness ever could. One morning, I woke up to find her sitting by the window, a small box in her lap. "What's that?" I asked. She hesitated, then opened it to reveal a tiny pair of knitted baby shoes. Pale yellow. I stared at them, uncomprehending at first. "I'm pregnant, Bill," she said softly. The words crashed into me like a wave, leaving me breathless. 1,000 thoughts spun through my head at once: joy, disbelief, fear, longing. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding. "Are you sure?" She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I reached for her hand, pulling her into my arms. I didn't cry. I just held her, feeling the wild, unstoppable rhythm of her heartbeat against mine. For the first time since the diagnosis, I wanted to live. But wanting doesn't always change the story. My body was failing, no matter how fiercely I tried to deny it. There were nights when I woke gasping for air, clutching at my chest while Kira whispered soothing words I couldn't hear over the roar of my own lungs. I started writing letters for her. For the baby. Letters she wouldn't open for years, maybe decades. In one I wrote, "Don't grow up angry at the world for taking me. I want you to grow up knowing it also gave me the greatest gift, you." Kira didn't know about the will. She didn't know about the letters. I wanted her to find out later, when I wasn't here to see the pain in her eyes. I wanted her to remember me as the man who loved her, not the man who spent his last days planning his absence. But karma, I've learned, doesn't give us choices without consequences. The closer we grew, the heavier the silence became between us. She knew I was slipping away, even when neither of us said it. And I knew she was trying to carry strength for both of us, even as her own cracked beneath the weight. Some nights, I'd wake to find her holding my hand in her sleep, clutching it so tightly as if she could keep me tethered here. And I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, whispering silent bargains to a God I wasn't sure was listening. Just give me a little more time. Not for me. For her. Time didn't answer. But something else was coming. Something that would change everything. I always thought I'd know when it was time. I imagined some warning, a subtle shift, a whisper from the body that says, "It's close now." But the truth is, it didn't come like that. It came on an ordinary morning, wrapped in sunlight and silence. Kira woke before me, as she often did, padding softly into the kitchen to make coffee. I could hear the faint clinking of cups, the sound of the kettle, the low hum of her favorite old jazz station. I remember thinking how normal it all felt, and how desperately I wanted to freeze that moment and live inside it forever. When she returned, I was sitting up in bed, looking at the little knitted baby shoes on the nightstand. She smiled when she saw me holding them. "Do you like them?" she asked. I nodded, my throat tight. "They're perfect." She sat beside me, resting her head on my shoulder, her hand absently stroking her barely there bump. I whispered into her hair, "I'm sorry I won't be there to meet them." She froze. Don't say that, Bill. You will be here." I didn't argue. I just kissed the top of her head and closed my eyes, breathing her in. That night I couldn't sleep. I watched Kira curled up beside me, one hand resting on her stomach as if she was already protecting the life inside her. I thought about the future, hers, theirs. I thought about all the moments I would miss. First steps. First words. First heartbreak. I pressed my lips to her hand and whispered so softly I hoped the words would sink into her dreams. "I love you. Always. Even when you can't see me." 2 days later it happened. I woke before dawn with a tightness in my chest I couldn't shake. It wasn't pain, not exactly. Just heaviness, like the weight of the world had settled on my ribs. I didn't want to wake Kira, but she stirred anyway, sensing something was wrong. "Bill?" Her voice was small, trembling. I forced a smile. "Just tired, sweetheart." She didn't believe me. She grabbed her phone, fumbling with shaking hands. "I'm calling the doctor." I caught her wrist gently. "No hospitals. Not tonight." Her eyes filled with tears. "Don't you dare do this to me." I pulled her close, feeling her warmth, her heartbeat racing against mine. I held her until my breathing slowed, until the fear in her eyes softened into something quieter. And I made her a promise I knew I couldn't keep. "I'll be here in the morning." The morning came. I wasn't. After. I've often wondered if love leaves fingerprints. If it lingers in the air after someone's gone, hiding in the spaces between silence and memory. Kira told me later, in a letter she wrote and never sent, the hospice nurse said, that the house felt full the next day. Full of me. Full of everything I'd left unsaid. She found the letters first. I'd hidden them in the study, in a wooden box beneath a drawer lined with old invoices and property deeds. There were 36 in total. One for every year I should have had with her. One for every milestone I'd never get to see. She didn't read them all at once. She read the first 3, then put the rest away. She said it felt like holding pieces of me she wasn't ready to let go of. Then she found the will. I can imagine her face as she unfolded the papers, expecting numbers and cold legal words, only to see my handwriting scrawled at the bottom. Everything I have is yours. Always was. Always will be. She told me later, though I wasn't there to hear it, that she cried for hours, not because of the money, but because she realized just how much I had planned for a future I wouldn't live to see. Months passed. Seasons turned. Kira carried our child into the world on a quiet spring morning. A little girl with my eyes and her mother's stubborn jaw. She named her Grace. I like to think I was there, somehow, in the way the sunlight streamed through the window, in the hush of the room as Grace took her first breath. Years later, Kira would take Grace to the old pizzeria, the first one I ever bought with trembling hands and too much hope. She'd sit her down at a corner table, order the same thin-crust margarita I used to swear was perfect, and tell her about me. She'd tell her how I made mistakes, how I fought ghosts, how I found love when I wasn't looking for it. She'd tell her that sometimes life gives you just enough time to find what matters, and just enough courage to let it go. And maybe, just maybe, on quiet nights when the house is still, Kira will hear the creak of the study door, the soft whisper of footsteps, the faint scent of pizza dough and coffee in the air. And she'll know. Love doesn't end. It just changes shape.
Do you believe in karma? Share your experience with me in the comments. Subscribe to my channel to hear even more interesting stories from the diary of my grandmother, who worked in an American hospice for over 10 years. These are stories about love, faith, forgiveness, karma, the victory of life over death, about the ability to live and love, about symbols and the reincarnation of the soul. I've never done this before, but this story can't end as sadly as it did. According to my grandmother, Bill wrote a letter to his daughter before he died. So I will share a secret epilogue, letter from Bill to Grace.
Dear Grace, if you are reading this, it means you have grown into the woman I always hoped you would become. I am not there to see your first steps, your first words, or the moments that make a life feel endless, but I am with you in every heartbeat, every breath, and every memory that your mother keeps alive for you. I want you to know something very important. Love is not about possession, and life is not about fairness. Your mother and I loved fiercely, even when time was not on our side. I fought to leave you a world filled with warmth, laughter, and stories, even though I knew I couldn't stay to watch you grow. That is the gift I could give you, the gift of a life that carries the echoes of love, not the weight of absence. Do not mourn me, Grace. I am not gone. I am in the stories your mother tells, in the lessons she passes down, in the quiet moments where the world feels both cruel and beautiful. I am in the light that hits your face in the morning, in the laughter that escapes your lips, in the love that surrounds you, the same love I held for your mother until my last breath. Always be brave. Always be kind. Always follow your heart, even if it scares you. Forgive the world when it hurts you, and forgive yourself for the moments you feel weak. You are more resilient than you know, and more loved than you can ever imagine. And remember this above all, life may not give us forever, but it does give us moments, perfect, fleeting, irreplaceable moments. Cherish them, Grace. Fill your life with them, and know that I am smiling every time you do. With all my heart. Dad.